Passion, purpose, possibilities. They're all right there. But sometimes we need a little push. And that's where SheSez comes in. Think of it as a master class taught by the world's most interesting women, sharing stories and ideas, because girlfriends help each other. This is SheSez with Linda Grasso. Hello and welcome to SheSez. If you're a fan of interior design-oriented magazines, you may have seen Kathryn Ireland on the cover of Elle Decor, Luxe, and World of Interiors magazines this past year. Yes, that's just this past year. Kathryn's signature style, which is chic and feels grand, but is also comfy and a little boho, has attracted clients including Steve Martin and Julia Louis-Dreyfus. She has authored 6 best-selling books and recently launched an innovative design concept called The Perfect Room. Kathryn, welcome.
Hello, thank you for having me on your show.
You are one busy woman.
Podcast. I have to say this is my first podcast.
Are you kidding me?
No.
Well, then that means next week you're going to be starting your own. That's how it goes with me. All my guests are launching their own podcasts. You know, I find your success so impressive. You're the mother of 3 boys. Now they're in their 20s. But I was also really fascinated by the fact that you came to interior design and being a textiles magnate in a circuitous route. You started out wanting to be an actress, and then you got into producing music videos, and you were successful. Share.
Well, you know, I always thought acting was my calling. But I came to LA, met my husband, who was a film director. We got married after 8 weeks, and the night of our wedding, which, by the way, was just because we had a day off shooting, he said, "Oh, by the way, I don't want to be married to an actress." So I said, "Oh, you could have told me that the night before." Anyway, so I went, "Okay, fine, that's okay." So I produced music videos with him in the 80s, sort of mid to late 80s, early 90s. I mean, you'll know them: the Bangles, Walk Like an Egyptian, Call Me Al, Paul Simon, Chevy Chase, George Harrison, Got My Mind Set on You. I know we worked with everyone. We worked with The Smoke, Dolly Parton, Donna Summer. Oh, gosh.
Wow. So how did you sort of close that door and move on to interior design?
Because I'd had my 3rd child, Louis. I had 3 boys within 4 years. And I was sitting in my kitchen holding this 3-week-old baby. And Steve Martin came for dinner. He was recently divorced. And he just looked at me and said, "I really want to live in your house." And I said, "Fine with me." Gary Weiss, my fabulous husband, I looked at Gary, and they, by the way, were old friends from Saturday Night Live. We looked at Gary, and I said, "Gary, is it okay if Steve moves in?" And Gary made a face like, "What the fuck?" and walked out, and Steve said, "That didn't go very well." I said, "Oh, don't worry, I'll find you a house anyway." So that was sort of how it happened, and I just was good at houses, and I would come back from England carrying a lamp. I didn't realize that there was a design center.
So hang on, you before Steve Martin said that when he came in your house, you were an avid home decor interior design fan. And you, it sounds like you were a buyer as well. You like to buy. And
well, also we hadn't, you know, for the first 5 years, we were saving up for a down payment on our first house. And of course, we wanted to live north of Montana Avenue in Santa Monica.
Cha-ching, cha-ching, yeah.
So, you know, every year we rented a house, and it had to get bigger because I had another child. So I got extremely good at taking my garage sale items and remaking them and hanging them up in the next house. I just can't bear chaos because I'm a little chaotic. So at home, I like everything organized and quick. I don't want to see boxes, you know. I just like everything unpacked within a day. So I get good at it.
So tell me what happened after that moment.
So then I had a wonderful 3 years with Steve, helping him on his the house we bought. Of course, then it had to be furnished. Helped him in Santa Barbara and New York.
So he was really, for the first 3 years, your only client?
Yeah. Oh, yes.
And did he, you didn't have any kind of degree? You hadn't gone to any design school?
No, just the only degree I had, I suppose, was I was extremely lucky to grow up in beautiful houses around Europe. You know, all my friends from school lived in stately homes.
What did your parents
villas. Do? My father was in banking. My mother was a housewife, but she was a really good decorator. In England, you did your own houses. I mean, sort of, You didn't. I remember my mother once had an interior designer. Please don't tell anyone. She was rather embarrassed. But, I suppose I went to the right schools. That was important, my mother.
So you grew up with good taste.
Surrounded by good taste, whether it was spending a summer at La Rotonda near Padova, which was a villa designed by Skomorski, who was one of Palladio's students, to Wynyard Hall in the north of England, which was one of the most beautiful stately homes. As a child, aged 5, 6, 7, we'd be running through the ballrooms to go playing hide and seek or whatever. So that was my background.
I imagine Steve Martin was an entree into other celebrities. I mean, he was probably entertaining and other people came in his house. And is that the way you built your interior design business?
I didn't really think about building an interior design business. I had 3 small children. I was having a good time doing his house. Yes, it then followed on that I either was working with divorced men or comedians. I worked with Lorne Michaels, who was obviously, he was my ex-husband's sort of best friend.
They had worked together on Saturday Night Live.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So at what point did you think, this is more than just a little side hustle that I'm doing while I'm being a mother to these 3 kids? I'm really good at this and I should launch a business.
You know what I did? I opened a tiny store on Main Street with Amanda Pays, who was a great girlfriend of mine, who was an actress. It was our old editing suite. I mean, it's literally the size of the room we're in. And I had a big collection of antique textiles that I collected over the years. So I started making pillows and lampshades and accessories. And it just took off, and we had a full page in the old House and Gardens, Amanda and I sitting on the curb holding pillows, and boom, we were in business. So I had that little shop, and then I started decorating, and it was at a time when there was really very little else going on. These little boutique
This was in the
places.
late 80s.
Yeah, late. I opened it in 90. Yeah, it must have been 90.
Were you surprised at your success, which was really, in terms of being a retailer, it was almost overnight?
Yeah, it was. And also, it was such a small shop. You only needed someone to come in and buy 6 pillows. Well, 2 pillows, actually. Actually, 1 pillow, I paid the rent. Pillow and I paid the rent.
Back in the day.
Back in the day.
Oh, God.
So anyway, it all just had this very nice transition to it.
So how did it get bigger? How did it get to the point where you were, selling in showrooms all over the world?
So what happened was, now I had, 4 or 5 clients. They were all friends. They were all out in the Hamptons. I was working with Caroline Kennedy, and Lorne Michaels was friends. And I had a whole bunch of people. They knew each other, and I was like, oh my gosh, how else, apart from Benison and Colfax and Fowler, that's how little knowledge I had of things and what was out there. I said, well, I know I've got a fabric collection in me. So I thought, I'll just design a fabric collection. And I had this fabulous old patchwork quilt from about the 1880s that was on my bed. And the boys used to use, I had this great 4-poster bed, and the boys would use the bed as a trampoline. And then the canopy was sort of for throwing balls and things. So, and I looked at this one day and I thought, oh, this is my most favorite thing. I'm so sad. It's in shreds. And I looked at it again. I looked at it and I went, you know what? I have a collection here. And that was how it started. So
and that design, that original design, was sort of a patchwork quilt.
Yes.
Wow, that's so interesting, because you've really evolved. I mean,
yes.
So much of your, I love your batik prints. And
well, the thing was, in those days, makes me sound so old. Hand printing. I was one of the first interior designers that went on to have a fabric line. Well, obviously, there are hundreds of fabric lines. The Cravat and Chelsea Textiles, but very few designers. I think.
So your timing was right. Now we see a lot more.
Oh, no. It's flooded. The market is flooded. I've had to reinvent the whole business via my middle son, Otis, he was living in London, and he came back for Christmas a couple of years ago and had to have back surgery. And so whilst he was recuperating, I said, well, he was a major in finance. I said, well, why don't you look at my business? I mean, at least you can do something whilst you're on your back. So he looked at my business and he said, Mum, your business sucks. I said, excuse me? He said, yeah, well, you can't be producing everything yourself, because by now I had an 8,000 square foot building. I was doing my own hand printing, sewing rooms. I mean, it was like walking, and you walked into this building, it's in Culver City, just down the road, and you kind of went, wow, because you had no idea what you were walking into. And part of it was Downton Abbey-esque, where I did all my entertaining, vast dining rooms, vast stately living rooms. And then on the other side, I had my print shop. So I evolved into all of that.
So was he basically saying, Mom, you're doing all these endeavors, but you're not making enough money to support them, or restructure, or focus?
Yes.
What was his sort of main piece of advice to you?
Main piece of advice was we had to restructure, and if he was going to get involved, he then said, listen, because he saw the opportunity, I want to come in and restructure the textile business. I'm interested in textiles. He looked at the numbers. He saw all the things. My biggest sellers were actually my wovens, the things that people just use for window treatments. I'm known for my patterns and my colour, but, you know, they're expensive. 6 to 10 screen prints are expensive.
So he was saying focus on more natural weaves with solid colors, because I've seen that Otis line that you offer.
That's exactly where we went. So he saw a very good opportunity. So he said, if I'm going to take it over, you've got to hand me the reins. And, you know, it was a point where I was getting involved in the tech world, and I went, yes, that would be great. And so he said, what I want to do is close down production. We can always go back to it, but we just have to reorganize.
Well, that's so interesting,
Because
Kathryn, that you were open to that. I mean, so often we hear that, particularly from a family member. Like, I hate it when my husband criticizes me. I can take it from anyone else, but sometimes from him, I'm just like, you know. And here's your son coming in, and yet you heard what he
I listened
said.
to him because he knows. I have a vague idea. The money goes into my head, and I sort of know when I can't spend anymore. You know, I've always said to my bookkeeper, tell me when we're down to, I've got only 3 months left in me before I have to, you know, rent out my house or whatever. By the way, the boys grew up. That's how they lived. It was feast or famine, because, you know, I brought them up basically and put them to college.
So you ultimately divorced your
very,
producing husband.
Very, very amicably. But that's a whole other story. He wanted to fish. He's a fisherman now. So he fishes. He's an island fishing, as we speak. But it was for all the right reasons.
Right.
That's another podcast.
Well, so your kids really watched you work hard and support them. And you're suggesting that sometimes it was great and sometimes it was just
Well, it was difficult because, you know, 1 minute you had big jobs, flavor of the month, and then sometimes, and I was supporting, we have a house in France, which I bought with Gary on our honeymoon.
Yes, I see how you have the lady retreats. You bring ladies there and you guys do intense design workshop. That's a fantasy of mine to come to one of those.
It's so much fun. Please do.
Oh my gosh.
We can podcast from France.
I think we should podcast the entire time.
Shall I tell you the most fun thing about these last 6 or 7 years doing this is that I have made the best friends. And you know what? Other people's stories are so interesting. I mean, I just came back from doing one, and these 8 women, I can't tell you. We had a documentary filmmaker from England, to a wonderful woman from Tallahassee. Everyone has a great story. Every single woman has a great story.
Do you find being able to connect with people integral to your success, whether you're writing books or doing your workshops or decorating for a client?
It's all about interacting. I mean, because first of all, it's more about a lifestyle. I mean, my latest book, which I brought you a copy of, Kathryn at Home, it's not just living. It's not just living in a space. It's what do you eat? What do you drink? Just also the informality of how I think one should live. I mean, that's me. People come to me that have children and dogs. If you want to build a house with a foyer, there are lots of other designers you go to, because that sounds a little, not that I can't do grand. I love grand, but I take grand into the English country home look where you've got your Labradors on the sofas.
You make it accessible.
Exactly.
I mean, the worst thing for me is when you see a room and it feels off limits, like you just can't kick off your shoes and pony up with a good book.
And also, I like age. I'm crazy about architecture, whether it's French, English, Scottish. My fantasy was I nearly bought the house I coveted as a child in Scotland where I grew up. that didn't happen. You know, I have a feeling it'll be back on the market in my lifetime.
I want to talk about the perfect room, a really innovative concept that you came up with lately. It's you've got a whole website, so anybody who's listening can go to theperfectroom.com and see it themselves.
Well, I had this idea, you know, many years ago, some years ago. What I found with all my fellow designers is we all go, oh, we have a great life and we've got great jobs, but we can't roll ourselves out. There's only one of us. So how do we get to the next level? How do we have an income? What's our old age going to look like? You know, people have got licensing deals, or you've got a fabric line or whatever. But I like to always push boundaries and see what else is out there. And, you know, I've been great friends with Susan Feldman from One Kings Lane, who I know you've had on your podcast. And my eldest son, Oscar, was the number 5th employee at the Dollar Shave Club, which is one of these extraordinary phenomena. I mean, you know, we're not all going to sell in under 4 years for $1 billion selling a razor blade. But so I got very interested, and I actually had a tech retreat. I give my house in France away to different charities, and one charity, one group, they're all in tech. And my girlfriend said, oh, when are you arriving in France? And I go, no, I'm not coming. She said, no, I think you are. I think everyone's expecting you. I said, no. The house, you got the cook, everything. I can't. She said, well, listen, if you've ever wanted to be in tech, I would get over there. So I said, oh, okay. So I said, well, if I can get a miles ticket tomorrow, I'll leave. I did. So this was 3 years ago.
How was the retreat for you?
Oh my God, there were people from Apple, from Facebook, from Twitter.
So were you a little bit nervous about that?
No, I was at my house. I just thought I'll go over, spend a couple of nights, make sure, you know, they know where the candles are and, you know, where the wine cellar is, that kind of thing.
No intimidation about all the tech talk going over your head?
No, because they were all friends. It was like a little reunion group. And I reached out to one guy who was sitting by the pool, and I just said, you know, I've got this idea in me. And he had written code for the first iPhone. And
good contact.
So I just said, I've got this idea. I want people to be able to go and buy a room online, but high end, not just any old room. So about a week later, he sent me a thing he'd written.
Proposal?
Well, no, just he sent me images and the actual thing and said, this is what you're talking about. And I go, oh, yeah, great. Anyway, so we knew it could be done. And, you know, when you start visualizing things, the funny thing is things come to you. So the next thing is I get a phone call from a couple who have a house they want renovating in Woodside, so in Silicon Valley, and he works at Apple. And all of a sudden, I'm going up there, and I'm going, oh, and this is interesting, and my life. So I took this idea, and then I thought, oh, well, you know what? I've got to do an MVP, minimal viable product. So I was working on it. Cut to go to London, having breakfast with one of my oldest girlfriends. We were, you know, from my teenage years, and she said to me, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Oh, you know, I'm coming up with it. I'm going to do this online platform where people can design online directly with A-list designers and buy using their photographs from their books or magazines. Those will be the inspiration, and we will then do everything to white glove deliver it, have field designers there
to help us set it up. So you're basically purchasing a room.
Yes,
and you're pulling different objects.
We can custom them, but we will do you buy the $9.99 package, you get a box with all the swatches in it, you get your blueprint, the CAD drawings. There are different. There's a $350 package. There's a $250 package. So there are all these.
What do they go up to? What's the max?
Well, $9.99 right now. We'll see how So anyone listening, just go and have a little look at the site. But what was so funny was my girlfriend said to me, "Kathryn, Al and I invest in tech," and I went, "You do?" She said, "Would you mind showing it to me first?" So I said, "Okay." So a few months later, I emailed her. I said, "Oh, Prue, I've got my business plan and my MVP ready." She said, "Good. Al's flying from Sydney to London. He'll stop in LA." So he arrives. We have a kind of great day. He arrives very early, like 6 a.m. So at the end of it, he goes, "Oh, I'm here. You're going to show me something." So I showed it to him, and I thought, "Oh God, that was the worst pitch meeting ever." And he said, "Great, look, I like the idea. If you can raise, I'll give you half of what you're looking for." So that was.
So you had to go out and raise the money, and then he matched it.
Yeah, well, he matched what I said I needed.
Tell me, describe the ideal, the perfect room customer. It's a person who's looking for what?
I'll tell you, I think it is in the higher end. I think our demographics are, it's the Henrys, high earners, not rich yet, and it's females over 50. It's people that are...
Why females over 50?
Because two reasons. They're inheriting money. They're moving, they're empty nesters, their kids have moved on, or they're helping their children buy homes or decorate.
Everything that I've talked to you about today and read about you has just been like this incredible, almost like Midas touch. It seems like you touch this, it works. You touch this, it works. I mean, some people are in the music video industry and they never get to work with the likes of Paul Simon or George Harrison. You tried the perfect room, it hits. Have you ever made any missteps? And if
plenty, of course.
If so, more importantly than making them, how did you overcome them?
I think you just assess slightly like, I looked at when I had my print shop and I was hand printing myself, I felt that was a failure when I closed it. But you know what? It isn't. It's you have to look at it. None of this is failure. It's a learning curve. So I don't really, there is no failure.
Does your success surprise you? I mean, if you had I told you this when you were 18, like, okay, here's what you're going to be. You're going to do this. You're going to do this. You're going to, in midlife, you're going to be like getting into tech and going online with a platform.
No, because, it would be like if we all had the crystal ball, we'd be horrified for good reasons or not. I never had a roadmap for my life, and I met a husband. I knew I wanted to have children, and I was lucky to have them sort of, by the time I was 30, I had them all. I'd got a house in France by then. I had a great marriage. I don't know. I just didn't really think about my next step. It's all sort of happened organically. I mean, the only reason I started doing the retreats and the boot camps was, was it 2008, 2009, the last economic downturn. All my clients sort of put their houses on hold, and I thought, yikes, I've got about 3 months left in me. Luckily, I had the TV show $1 Million Decorator.
Oh yeah,
on Bravo.
That must have been a big boost to your career.
Oh, it was fabulous.
What does that do? Basically, give you, world. That's your name. Puts your name up to the top of the Google.
It does.
Search.
It gives you a lot of Twitter followers, because it was really Twitter back then. Now, of course, it's Instagram. It opened many doors. One of the reasons I did it was I thought, no one is going to hire me after they see me in this show. And I always made sure I had a glass of wine in my hand. But funnily enough, all those wine lovers, I was getting photographs from people saying, oh my God, here's someone who likes a glass of wine.
Oh, I love it.
So it opened many doors. And from there, I was able to put on Twitter, come to my design boot camp, because I realized people were really cutting their spending dramatically. People were still working on houses. But I thought, well, why don't they come to me, and in 3 days we'll workshop their house, either teach them whatever it is they want to know. So I bring in special guests, like we had Nina Campbell last year in the Cotswolds. Actually, that's her second appearance. I've had Rachel Ashwell. She was in France this summer.
She was
Martin
the shabby
Lawrence,
chic lady.
Yes.
Remember how big she was in the 90s?
Well, funnily enough, she and I met at Mummy and Me. Her son Jake and my son Oscar met at some sort of, tumble time or
that's so sweet
thing.
And you're still buddies.
And she started her sofa store right around when I started my pillow store. And we were great friends, and we still are to this day.
I see you as sort of a master reinventionista, as someone who's really able to, ebb and flow with the times, dips her toe into what's interesting her in the moment, and is sort of fearless. Does that sound like you?
I'm fearless. I think one has to be fearless. What's the point of fear? There is no point. I mean, you just have to get up and make mistakes. If you fall over, you get back up. I mean, I was a rider growing up, and I'll never forget, the the one thing I was taught. If you fall off your pony, you're getting straight back on.
Yeah.
You have to.
So many of our listeners are trying to craft their next chapter, whether they've been at home with kids for years and they're going, oh, the kids are in school, what am I going to do now? Or they've been doing some job that, they are bored of, just so sick of. What can we learn from your story, Kathryn?
Gosh, I think what I would say, especially to people who are bringing up children, is, like you work out, whether you do Pilates or yoga, whatever it may be, keep working your brain out, keep your interest going, have a part-time job. I've always taken people on part-time because I think it's very important. There's no point having brought up your children and then all of a sudden you get to 40 or whatever and go, okay, and now, that life has changed dramatically and they don't have the tools. They know nothing about how they can step into this new generation. I mean, so I just say, do something if you can, a part-time job, keep your interests there, read. I mean, when I got into wanting to be in tech, all I did was read books, Peter Thiel, 0 to 1, Get Backed. I mean, my bedside reading is not Barbara Cartland anymore. So yeah, I think reading and being interested, that's all you can do. If you're interested in something, you can and you will make it happen.
Kathryn Ireland, I so enjoyed meeting you and hearing your story. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you, Linda.
And thank you to our listeners for joining us. If you like what you hear, hit subscribe. New episodes of SheSez will automatically be downloaded. And quite frankly, when you're a subscriber, it's a lot easier to listen while you're driving the car or walking the dog. You can tap your podcast app and simply hit play. And if you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts, write a review. It takes a minute and will help us stay alive. Just tap where it says see more episodes. Scroll down to the very bottom and you'll see where you can fill in the stars. We'd love 5, of course, and write a review. Don't forget to press send. Thanks again, and we'll see you with a new episode next Tuesday.